Hi everyone. So this video is walking you guys through Everyday Use by Alice Walker, which is a beautiful, beautiful short story. It's probably one of my favorites. And we look here at an understanding of what it is to be American and also what it is, what one's culture means. So we have two characters when we start. It's first-person narrative. We start by looking at this unnamed mother figure and her younger daughter, Maggie. And they're waiting on a visit from her other daughter, Dee, with Dee's new boyfriend and or husband. They're not sure. They're very proud to have her come visit. They have this house, this very humble house. It's on a farm. There's a pasture and there's all kinds of labor that they do. And they've worked really hard to make the house look nice. They've cleaned the yard, they've swept, and they're kind of waiting for Dee to come. And you get a very clear understanding of characters here. So you look at the mother and the way she's described, the narrator describes herself. You look at how she describes Maggie and how she describes Dee. So she talks about sort of Dee's journey, and Dee was the one that quote-unquote made it. And she imagines what it would be like if Dee came home in this sort of child that's made it in America narrative, and how great it would be if she just came home and embraced her and told her how wonderful it was to be home. And she realizes that's not how Dee is. That's never going to happen. That's not the reality of her or her life. And then she goes into an understanding of who she is. So real life is very different. She says that she's a large, big bone woman with rough working man hands. So she's used to physical labor. She's used to having to take care and provide. It's a tough life, and it's one that she's willingly done. She realizes that she's not clean and polished. She's not beautiful and thin. She is a hardworking woman who's seen a lot in life and bore 2 children and raised them successfully. And she says, but of course all of this does not show on television. So she's saying what we show in this media culture, American culture, is not reality. It's always the pretty perfect picture image. It's not what's real and hearty and true and gritty. And she looks down and she sees Maggie, and we get a foreshadowing because she looks at Maggie's scars from the burns. And we know something has happened. But Maggie is a very sweet-tempered, quiet kid who's, in her own mother's words, she's nothing, she's nothing remarkable. She's not super intelligent. She's not super anything. She's just a nice, sweet little girl. And she says Dee is different. Dee is super confident. She's strong, all of which are great. But as we see Dee come into the picture in the next section, we realize that she's very brash and unappreciative and difficult. So Maggie is in a beautiful new dress. She's very excited and she's bashful, and she says, how do I look, Mama? She says, come out into the yard, and they're excited to have her. And Dee pulls up, and before she pulls up, there's a flash, sort of almost a flashback, where the mother is talking about, it's been almost, I think she says 10 years since the house burned down, 10 or 12 years. And she said when the house burned down, Maggie was the one that got scarred. Maggie got caught in the fire and got burned and got physically maimed from this. So she has the sort of physical punishment from this. Dee, she says, she looked up and saw, as the house burned down behind her, she looked up and saw Dee under the tree. And the look on her face was like she was watching every last piece fall with sort of fervor. And she almost wanted to ask, why don't you do a dance around the ashes? Because she always talked about how much she hated that house. So Dee, you get the sense, wanted to escape. She didn't want to be from this heritage. She didn't want to be with her family, who she considered simple and uneducated and backwards. So they raised money for her to go to a private school. She would read to them in a way that was extremely condescending, thinking they were too stupid to really understand what this was about. Dee, she says, wanted nice things. She was superficial. She wanted this yellow dress, this orange dress. She knew what she was, but she also was very unappreciative of where she came from. And that lack of understanding of one's roots and one's culture is ironic given what happens next. So the mom says that, she never was educated. Things, she says, were a little bit different in 1927 for people of color. And she says it very matter-of-factly. She doesn't complain. She doesn't say that she wishes it was different. She just says this is how it was. So we get this understanding of reality versus imaginative futures or imaginative pasts between the mother and Dee. And she says she's always better at a man's job. So she really likes the hard work. She's good at it. She knows how to survive, essentially. Whereas Dee, it doesn't seem really does. So, Dee is ashamed of her family. She says she'll come and visit wherever the family chooses to live, but she'll never bring a friend. And Maggie very innocently says, "Mom, when did Dee ever have any friends?" She doesn't mean it meanly, but it's an interesting characterization aspect that we are understanding that Dee is really difficult and is not exactly a kind person. So Dee comes, and Maggie here becomes almost voiceless. When Dee shows up, Maggie no longer speaks. And that's very, very significant in the sense of how you understand how the characters displace one another. So she displaces Dee in this context. And Dee fades into the background because she's scared of her sister. She's scared. She's in her sister's shadow very much. Dee steps out, and she's got this very loud, colorful dress, these bangles, all these different things. And she greets them with this greeting, and the mother has no idea what she's saying. And she tells her that she is no longer Dee. She is Wangaroo, da-da-da-da-da. And she says, "What do you mean? You're named after your aunt?" And then she's named after her grandmother and her grandmother. And Dee replies that, "Oh, you have no idea about your culture." And what she means is the African roots. But Dee doesn't know anyone from that lineage. She's only appropriating what she thinks is sort of cultural roots. In reality, you see the mother who's able to say, "Well, you got it from your aunt, you got it from her grandmother, you got it from her grandmother." And so she's actually able to trace back the lineage of the family through the Civil War. And so again, we have this idea of sort of imaginative versus reality. And Dee says, she's rejected this identity of her oppressors, and she introduces the boyfriend and or husband named Assalamu Alaikum. And the mother basically points out that it is a ridiculous name. It's too long. She can't even say it. And they go and they have dinner, and you see these patterns of behavior where these two young people have rejected an identity and adopted a new one that is essentially a false identity. He doesn't eat certain things. They are pseudo-intellects. So she says, "Oh, you must come from the people down the road." And he says, "I accept some of their doctrines, but farming and raising cattle is not my style." So it's a really insulting thing to say, but it comes across as a pseudo-intellectualism. And the mother may not fully understand everything that they say, but she's sharp, and she understands what they're saying is complete and utter crap. And so as they're running around the house, Dee is taking pictures of them, and she says, "Oh, how quaint and how beautiful." And she starts to claim things that she wants in the house. And she says, "Oh, I knew there was something I wanted to ask if I could have." She says, "I want the butter dish, and I want this, and I want the butter churner, and I want this." And everything that she's claiming is things that they actually use. They make butter in the butter churner. They use these things that their family has created and made and physically made out of wood and whittled. And the mother is looking at her saying, "But that's something that was made for us. That was something that was made for us by Uncle blah, blah, blah." And she's really insulting. Dee is very straightforward and insulting. And she says Maggie's brain is like an elephant's. She's trying to say a compliment, but again, she's kind of insulting her sister. So as they're finishing up dinner, she asks her mother, "Can I have one of the quilts?" And they go and they look at the quilts. And there's a quilt on the wall that was made by the great-grandfather made for the great-grandfather in the Civil War. So this is something that has actual value to the family, value in terms of sentimental value. And the mother gently tries to say, "Well, why don't you take one of these ones instead?" She says, "No, I want that one." And the reason is that she wants something that has monetary value. Whereas for the mother, it's emotional and sentimental value. More than that, though, it's something that they use. And she says, I promised Maggie that. And Dee says she'd probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use. She can't appreciate these. And the mother doesn't understand the statement. She says, yes, exactly. I hope somebody will put them to use. So we come back to this idea of reality versus sort of false imagery. So Dee wants the quilt to display as a display of her quote-unquote cultural heritage, and because it has monetary value. The mother wants it because it means something to Maggie. It means something to the family, and it can be used. It should be used. So the quilt symbolizes this difference between the two women and their understanding of culture and their understanding of reality and use. And Maggie, being very sweet, hears this from the kitchen. You hear her drop something. So you know she wants the quilts. And she just comes in and very quietly says, it's okay, Mama, she can have them. So you see here that this sweet little girl is in every way a bigger person than her adult sister could ever be. She's more mature, she's more kind, she's more giving. And Mother says this was this was Maggie's portion. This is the way she knew God to work. So she admires Maggie more than she admires Dee in this moment. And she finally has the courage to stand up to Dee and snatches the quilt out of her hand. And Dee leaves in a huff. And she says, I snatched it out of Miss Wangaroo's hand and dumped them on Maggie's lap. And then she says, take one or of the others. And she leaves in a huff. And she says, you don't understand. And the mother says, what? And she says, your heritage. And this was a very ironic statement because it's exactly what Dee does not understand. She doesn't understand her heritage as an American, whereas her mother very much does. So they leave, and the mother and Maggie kind of enjoy their success together.